Satnam, yogis and yoginis, hello and welcome. Today we have a lovely conversation around breathing. Breathing is one of the most important aspects of yoga and it deserves a lot of attention. I was actually considering maybe we could do even a whole course on breathing, but today we're going to do a little introduction to something particular about breathing, which is the breathing patterns that we have. And which is how we breathe. Yeah, how is the breathing? How do you see the breathing in you is going to reflect a lot of what's happening in you apart from the breath, something related to your body and your emotions and your mind. And we're going to see a little bit of that today. And we're going to see also, we're going to do a particular breath that is very interesting. I think you can benefit from that. On Thursdays, you know that I'm taking a break from the course that we are doing on Tuesdays. Right now we are doing the Yoga Sutras, and so Thursdays are open. If anybody wants to propose topics, you can write in the comments. But today I had already kind of selected this one, but keep them coming. Keep the suggested topics coming, and I will cover them in other videos. Breathing, why is it so important? And sometimes so neglected as well, because even for the one who practices yoga, what happens is that generally something that is very easy, apparently, to do, it may feel like it doesn't have a big effect on us. So if I can do this very weird asana with the leg stretched and then my other arm here, and I'm doing a balancing posture, and it requires a lot of strength and balance and focus and all that, it may seem that I'm doing a lot. And because you are doing a lot, that's you have this idea that that's going to create an incredible benefit. And yes, everything has a benefit, and all asanas have benefit. But just because a particular kind of breath may seem very simple and it doesn't require too much energy or too much effort, don't underestimate the value that it's having on us. So that's part of the thing that we want to say, that today, that how you breathe is how you live. And if you want to have a short and superficial life, you can have a short and superficial breath. You want to have a deep life, full with fulfillment and full of meaning, right? Then have a deep and full breath. And that's a direct relationship. The breath is the connection between all these three aspects that you hear so much about: the body, the emotions, the mind, the spirit. We talk about this so much that we sometimes forget that there is one key element that connects all of them, and that's the breath. The body is breathing. There's a physical aspect of breath, and you can work directly on the physical aspects of the breath, meaning that you can observe what is happening with the muscles as you're breathing and learn to regulate the muscles so that it's more efficient. And that's going to have also other side effects. So there's a physical aspect to the breath, and it's very connected to the physical body. And if we have some physical, like an injury, or we have some disease at this moment, we are sick, or we have some imbalance in the position of the body, or your spine, or some organ is inflamed, or some issue. If you have some issue in your body, especially in the torso, that's going to affect the breath. The breath is going to be affected by this. And that's the physical body, but also the emotions. There is an amazing link between emotions and breath. We are going to talk about this today, and we're going to see how the breath changes as we move from one emotion to the other. And not only the emotions change the breath, but the breath changes the emotions. There is a bidirectional link, so we can control how we are feeling by the way we are breathing, and that may be interesting. And then that's body, that's emotion. There is mind. The restlessness or the agitation of the mind is going to manifest in the way that the breath is flowing or lack of flowing, and more jagged and more with ups and downs, and not like a full slow flow straight line, but actually more jagged. And so the state of the mind is affecting the breath. And I know many psychologists and psychiatrists observe the breathing of their patients. Those who have been trained properly, they will they will check the body, and they will observe when the client comes and they are explaining their problems, they will notice how their breathing is changing. And the breathing is telling you a lot about what's happening within their minds and emotions. Because the thing is, we cannot see it externally very easily. There is no transparent, screen that can tell you what the client is thinking, but some thoughts and some emotions are going to manifest in the breath. And so by observing the breath, you can notice that. Also, there's other non-verbal forms of communication, like the face is also reflecting the emotions and so on. But today we're going to concentrate on this aspect, on the breath. And this is also bidirectional. So the state of mind affects the breath, and the breath affects the state of mind. So that's interesting. So body, emotions, mind, and spirit. And the spirit is connected to the breath. The breath, we say inspire, inhale. Inhale, we can also say inspire and expire. And expired is death, right? But inspired means in spirit. The spirit comes in. And, whenever you read in the teachings, you read this word spirit, if you wish, you can try substituting that word with consciousness. And very often you will see that the text takes a new meaning. Yeah, and you can find it easier sometimes to relate to the text if you read it like when this is talking about, awakening your spirit or the spirit coming in. You can think of it like awakening your consciousness, and the consciousness comes. So it's like waking up. So as we breathe in, the act of breathing in, bringing oxygen into the blood and the body, that's going to promote consciousness. And so having, if you're going to do a practice, for example, we recommend to open a little bit the window, have some fresh air. That's going to help to increase the oxygen in the blood. Also, it's going to help for the brain, and it's going to help for our consciousness. So as you are breathing consciously, that's also what we say, the spirit is coming into you. Yeah, you're not like lost in the fog of your fantasy in the mind, but you are more present and more conscious, and that requires conscious breathing. One thing I would like to point out also is that since there is this connection between the breath and the body and the emotions and the mind and the spirit, when you notice this connection, you will realize, okay, so I want to pay attention to what's happening with the breath, and I want to learn what can I do with the breath. How can I regulate the breath, and is there something that I can do with it that it can be helpful? And then, yoga is amazing for that. We have so many exercises, so many pranayams. But even before we go into pranayams and all that, let me just say singing. Learning to sing and chanting, and mantra chanting particularly, which is what we do in yoga, it forces you to become aware of your breath. And it forces you to utilize better your lung capacity, because if you are going to be chanting a mantra and it's a long mantra and you have to chant it in one breath, like it's a common practice, then you're going to need to have a full inhalation before chanting, and to be able to hold that air all the way while you are chanting, which is something that people who haven't trained have sometimes difficulty on. I see this in yoga trainings very, very often, that we will be just chanting the opening line of Om Namo Dev Namo or the Satnam. Excuse me. And some people are just running out of breath. And then they give this feedback. They say, how can you hold the breath so long? Or why can the others do it and I cannot do it? And well, the answer, it can be many things, but it's a combination of, the person is probably not used to using their lung capacity, so they don't use it too often. Maybe they even don't do a lot of sports. So also when you're doing sport, you're also utilizing your lung capacity, because the breath has to be deeper to provide oxygen for the cells. But if the person hasn't done sports, if they've never trained their breath deeply, then their superficial kind of breath is not utilizing enough of their capacity. They are not used to breathing deep. So you say inhale deep, but they are not really fully inhaling deep. So that's one issue. Another issue is that they don't know how to put the right amount of pressure to create the sound. And so they often put more pressure than is needed, or they open the vocal cords too much, and then there's a lot of air coming out, so they run out of air very quickly. It's not that they don't inhale deeply. Sometimes they do inhale deeply, but the air is coming out too quickly and not being able to hold or sustain the sound. And that implies also a lack of control of the muscles that are making the breath possible, which is similar, is the same mechanism to speaking, but when you speak, you have to control the flow of the air, the pressure of the air. So learning to sing and chanting mantras particularly is very much like a breathing exercise. So that's also very beneficial. But let's talk about basics of breathing first of all. And it may seem, maybe when I start speaking about this, some people will think, oh, this is very simple, I already know it. But actually, I'm going to mention a few things that many people don't know, and it's extremely important. I put it in the title as well, Paradoxical breathing. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more of detail. But basically, first of all, what should happen in the body when we are breathing. Let's say this is the body, and here we have one of the lungs and the other. And underneath the lungs, we have this muscle. This is the diaphragm. And it's concave, and it's like a dome. And this is what is the most efficient muscle that should be regulating breathing, but it's not the only one. There is a good number of muscles that control the breath. This will be the main one. But then we have intercostal muscles, that are linked between the ribs, and they're going to be pulling the ribs up, out to open the rib cage to allow for more air to flow in, and also even the neck and the shoulders, they're going to be also involved in the breath. So, but the diaphragm is the most efficient one. Why do I say this? Well, the diaphragm is the one that is below the lungs, and we have to understand first of all one thing: the lungs are not a muscle. The lungs are just organs, and which means that they don't inflate. The lungs don't. Let's say, how can I say this? They inflate, but not. What I mean is that they don't open up and they don't close down. They don't do the effort. There is muscles which pull on the surface of the lung, and that creates a void, and the air goes inside. So we don't really inhale. The lungs are not inhaling. We are creating a void, and the air is going in. So the muscles are not doing the effort. The effort is done by muscles. And which muscles can do this? Well, there's a number of muscles. The main one is the one that is below, and the ideal should be that, this is how it works. It should pull down. This is attached here, yeah, but it will pull down from the center, so it will come down like this, let's say. Yeah. And as the diaphragm comes down, all the space around the rib cage now is expanded because this is all connected tissue. So as it pulls down, the space gets bigger and the air can go inside. And when the diaphragm goes down, this is pushing down on all these organs that we have here. But these organs are solid. They are not going to be compressed, not too much. So we have all the intestines and the stomach and the pancreas, all these organs. As the diaphragm comes down, they're going to be pushed, and behind you have the spine. So it's going to be pushed forward. So you're going to see the belly button going up, out, forward. So when we talk about belly breathing, you don't have a lung in the belly, right? There's no lung in the belly. But why is the belly moving? Well, because the diaphragm is coming down, and that's you can see it in the belly coming forward. That's all the organs are being squished. Yeah. Now, this kind of breath is the most efficient because the diaphragm is just a muscle. When you have the intercostal muscles operating, these ones here, is less efficient because it's not just a muscle that opens up. There is the rib cage is full of all these bones. There's a very rigid structure, and it has certain flexibility to open up, but little or limited flexibility. So when we have to breathe deeply into the rib cage, then these muscles pulling up the rib cage, they are going to have to exert a lot of effort. So the effort that it requires in a muscle means that it takes more energy. And yeah, we can say, we are breathing, and when we breathe in, we receive energy. But you can also say, well, how much energy it takes to receive that energy. And when you move the diaphragm, that's soft and it's easy. It's a simple movement of just one muscle. And then it takes very little energy. When you have to utilize the rib cage and the muscles up here in the shoulders and neck, this is going to take a lot of effort, or let's say much more effort. It's not a lot of effort, but it's much more effort than the diaphragm. And therefore, it's going to be less efficient, which is the reason why normally, when we are not doing a conscious breath, when we are not consciously directing how our body is breathing, the body always tries to do the thing with the minimum effort. It's more efficient this way. So it will utilize the diaphragm. So in a regular breathing, I'm not going into paradoxical yet, but just the regular breath, if you look at a baby, or a person who is healthy in their breath and there hasn't been any issue, in the regular state is mainly just the diaphragm. And that is a certain capacity, so that expands the chest to a certain degree, so that it provides a certain lung capacity, but it's not your full capacity. So if we had from 0 to 100% capacity, then the regular breath that we often do, like during the day-to-day, it will be something like this, more or less. It goes up, then slows down a little bit, and then it comes down like this. Actually, I'm doing it too big. This should be even smaller than this. Okay, let me make it better. It should be more like this. Like this. Kind of like this. And in reality, what we have is that this breath, I'm going to use these ones as a reference, they are generally around 10 to 20%, we could say. This is around, I think, 600 milliliters. And the full lung capacity would be around 6 liters, more or less. So this is as much air as we generally use. It is only using the diaphragm. It's actually probably lower, closer to the 0. Not completely to the 0, but a bit lower. But you can see it's neither getting to 100%, neither is going to 0%, and it's only using generally around 10% of our capacity. And this is what is called, you can see from the shapes of the waves, we are talking about the maritime language. This is called tidal breathing. Today we're going to explore different signs, different signatures of the breath according to different emotions as well. We're going to see that in detail. But this tidal breathing is the regular breathing that we have during the day, and is very shallow, only around 10%, and 10 to 20%, and is very efficient because it takes little energy to breathe. And you are receiving energy, putting very little energy in. And generally we breathe, in average, most people is around 50 breaths per minute, more or less. Okay. Now, what is paradoxical breathing? And this is, in my experience teaching trainings, I see this in around 1 of every 6 or 1 of every 10 people. And that's quite high. And most people who do this, I would say 99% of those people who do paradoxical breathing, they don't even know. They don't notice. So the moment that they come into the training, and then I make them pay attention to their breath, and I would tell them what I'm going to say right now. If you want, you can just check, and it's very, very easy, simple to see. Put the hand on your belly. You can put it on the abdomen, this area, this region, and just inhale deep. Now, as you inhale deep, you will notice that the belly will either go in or out, generally. Yeah, it may stay stuck as well. But if it's going inwards, when you are inhaling, that's a paradoxical breathing. So what does that mean? Paradox is like something that seems like the opposite of what it should be, or there seems to be a conflict of some way. Well, paradoxical breathing is the navel going in. Let me put it like this. Let me put it the way it should be. The way it should be is that as we breathe in and the diaphragm takes the green shape and is going down, it's pressing all the organs, so the navel should go out. Out in the breathing in. If you find that breathing in, it goes in, then this is called paradoxical. Before I explain what that means, let's observe. What could cause this and how could we deal with this? Before we go into that, let's just see what it means. It means that the navel is going in, which means that the diaphragm is going up when we are inhaling. So I just ask you to try it and to put the hand in your belly. If you were one of those who, when you inhale, the navel goes in. I don't actually know real statistics of this, how many people there are, but my experience, 1 in every 6 or 1 in every 10. It might be much higher than that, actually, statistically. But that's what I've observed in yoga classes and yoga trainings. Now, wait a moment, because if I inhale and the diaphragm goes in, the diaphragm is creating pressure into the lungs. How can we inhale if we are creating pressure into the lungs? Because I just mentioned the lungs are not a muscle, and they just depend on other muscles to create the space. So if the diaphragm is going up, how are we creating space? Well, that's a problem. If the navel is going in, that means that all the other muscles have to engage. Yeah, these intercostal muscles and in the shoulders and the neck. Yeah, so all these other muscles in red have to exert an extra effort opening up so that the lungs can fill with air. And now you can remember one thing. I mentioned that the diaphragm is more efficient than the other muscles. So we're going to already see that the other muscles are less efficient. But not only that, not only the other muscles are less efficient because they take more energy, but they also have to compensate for all the negative space that we have because of the diaphragm. So if the diaphragm reduces the cavity in like a 20%, now the other muscles have to expand 20% plus a lot extra to be able to breathe. And you can imagine how restrictive that feels. The thing is, if you've been doing paradoxical breathing all your life, you never noticed. And it's very likely that you have been doing this without paying attention on how stressful it feels to just breathe in. But when you pay attention and when you notice, you put the hands on the chest and the belly and you do a slow breath in, and then you notice the navel going in and the abdomen tensing, the diaphragm going up, all this inner pressure, and then the compensation from the other muscles, you will realize how much effort we are doing in ourselves to be actually breathing in. And that shows, first of all, this symptom. Yeah, paradoxical breathing is a symptom, of something else. Look at it from this point of view. A part of your body is fighting against another part of your body. So the navel, the diaphragm is going up, and the other muscles are trying to compensate. So they have to fight with each other to be able to, who is the bigger one, so that we can breathe in. So every breath actually becomes like a fight. And every breath is stressful. because we have to compensate for all that negative space that is being generated from the diaphragm going up. So that's pretty bad. That's pretty nasty, and I can say it like this naturally, because I was one of those. I used to do the paradoxical breathing, and so first of all, before we can see what we can do with that how can we have this unnatural kind of breath? Because the diaphragm going up when we breathe in doesn't seem natural. It is not natural, but it can be a consequence of many things. From what I have observed, people who had asthma when they were young, that was my case, they have a tendency to go into this kind of breath. People who smoke, also, smoking creates a lot of tensions in the diaphragm and a lot of secondary causes as well. And I'm sure you know about that. It's not good for breathing, smoking. And that kind of smoking, which is also pulling up the diaphragm, that can create also like a memory into the diaphragm to inhale and pull up. And people who have suffered some strong emotional trauma, so some traumatic event, emotional event, emotions live in our abdomen. There is second brain here, we call it, yeah. There is a lot of neurons in this area. And there is a lot of the language of this brain is linked to our emotions. And when we feel butterflies in the belly, or when we feel nervous, we feel this feeling of emptiness, or that we are kind of like a lift going down, something is raising up. This strange feelings that occur in our belly is the manifestation of some emotion that is happening right there. So even though emotions can move through the body, and some will feel tingling in the fingers, or coldness into the hands, or hotness into the face, but the center of emotional response is around the abdomen. And so when we go through a traumatic experience, a traumatic emotional experience, it tends to get recorded somehow into the cells. There is this concept of cell memory. So our cells will record that, and our diaphragm will record some of these traumas. And it can be that as a consequence of having an emotional trauma, the diaphragm will get some sort of memory stored there that can cause this reversal of the breathing. So that's the three more common aspects that can cause this: the asthma, the smoking, and some emotional situation, traumatic situation. But I'm sure there is more. I believe there is physical causes as well. There could be some forms of inflammation. It could be like the consequence of a certain surgery, or there's also neurological situations as well, which can cause paradoxical breathing. So there can be a number of things that can cause this. But the good news is that it's actually really easy to unlearn this kind of breathing. And it just takes patience and commitment. But if you purposefully dedicate every day a little bit of your time to retrain your body to breathe properly, naturally, then in very short amount of time you can get there, depending on the dedication, intensity with which you do it. And it doesn't take more than 10 minutes, but it takes those 10 minutes for sure to do it every day for a certain amount of time. And it's possible that even after retraining it, you will experience in stressful situations that it happens again. And then when you are relaxed, you are going back to a more natural breathing. But especially at the beginning, you need to consciously do it. You need to talk to your body and ask to the belly button to come out when you are inhaling. We're not going to do the retraining exercises today. Maybe we can do it some other time, but it's really basic. It's just one hand on the belly, one hand on the chest. And you feel how when you inhale, you have to ask your abdomen to come out. And when you exhale, you have to ask your abdomen to come in. And I recommend to do this exercise laying down. And because laying down, when we are sitting up or standing up, we have a number of other muscles in the core of the body to hold the position together. Like right now, the position that I am in, sitting up, the muscles of my core are engaged, and there is a certain tension in the abdomen, and that is gonna go against your practice. If you want to relax your abdomen so that you can bring the diaphragm down and the belly out when you inhale, then all this tension to hold the body straight is not going to help. So when you are laying down flat on the ground, and actually this is the good news, this is wonderful to do before bed, because actually it's going to be really, really relaxing. Imagine all this tension that we hold inside from fighting against ourselves. When you go on bed, and you can try it, one hand on the belly, one hand on the chest, and just concentrate on the belly going in and out, up and down. So inhale up and exhale down. Maybe we will go deeper into the exercise if we actually do a course on breathing. If you are interested, let me know. You can write a comment. Tell me if this appeals you, and I will think about doing this at some point. And we could talk about this, how to retrain the body in more detail. But just doing this 10 minutes before going to sleep, put the hand on the belly and make sure there is this abdominal breathing, and the abdomen has to go up when you inhale and down when you exhale. That's going to start reprogramming the body. There's a few more exercises that we could do, but just from that perspective. Okay, now I mentioned that even when the moment that you start retraining your body, circumstances of stress are going to probably trigger the old behavior again. And that's probably also part of the causes of having paradoxical breathing. Actually, stress and a stressful situation triggers in the body what is this fight or flight response, and there is a lot of mechanisms that are happening at once. Yeah, the blood pressure goes up, the sensitivity in the skin goes down, blood goes away from the stomach, it doesn't need to digest, we have to go to the body to defend ourselves or to fight or to fly, to run. You know, if there is a lion, I don't have to digest what I just ate, I have to run away. And that's why some people in extreme stressful circumstance, they can defecate themselves, because they lose control of some muscles, and there is a lot of things happening at once. Yeah, fear can do that. Fear is just what triggers the stress response. Okay, stress. The thing about stress, we talked about this many times already, but there's not stress only when you have a lion in front of you. There is a secondary form of stress, which is when the mind is telling you there is some danger. And then if you are constantly in a certain state of stress in your life, you're constantly stressed. One of the things that stress does is that it contracts the abdomen. With a core, like stronger core, you are more ready to fight a lion. You know, the abdomen is going to protect your organs. So if you're going to go into a fight, you have to be protected. And also, this strength of the core is going to help you, if you have to run, then it's going to give you the right support to start running. So the contraction of the abdomen is linked to the stress response. So if you are somebody who is naturally in a stressful state, constantly stressing and worrying about things, then the abdomen is often tight, which is also going to put tightness around the diaphragm. And even if it's not paradoxical breathing, it's already going to be difficult just to move the diaphragm. So even if you are not paradoxical breather, through stress, the diaphragm is already going to be still, and you're going to be engaged in the secondary mechanism of breathing for the lungs to be able to get air. Now, that experience of the diaphragm static or even going against you, in the paradoxical, and you breathing up, you can recognize that that's a feeling like anxiety. It's this, you have to go up, the breath is up here, you have to go into the upper chest, and that's an anxious feeling. Well, anxiety is going to be linked to this, and this is going to be linked to anxiety. So if you hold yourself in a stressful situation, or you think that you are in a stressful situation, if you stress about things, if you're worried about things, that pressure in the navel, in the abdomen and the diaphragm that's going to make the breathing difficult, and it's going to have to utilize the less effective methods of breath. You're going to be fighting against yourself, and that's going to create more anxiety. So it's like a loop, yeah, and it fits itself, and it's quite terrible. So it is not a coincidence that many psychologists will tell you just take a few deep breaths. Yeah, you don't have to be like a yogi to understand that if you manage to uncontract this area and be fully deep belly breaths, you're going to start releasing part of the tension that is generated by the stress, but also means that you're going to release the inner stress response from yourself, and you're going to feel better about what's happening and maybe see it differently. Very often the stress comes because we see things in a light that is not reality. It's just how we see it. And if you can relax yourself, which is difficult if you are stressed, but if you can relax yourself by doing these deep breaths, you can see things more in a more neutral light and realize maybe it's not worth worrying so much. I don't need to go into this panic attack right now. And so breath has become a great tool for psychologists and psychiatrists to give to help people who are having a stressful and a lot of anxiety and a lot of these feelings and emotions. Okay, so, but how do different emotions affect? We talked about stress in general, and I mentioned that every emotion and even mental states are going to have a particular signature on the breath, which means that if I notice how is your breath, I can know something about what's happening within you. So let's take a look at that. Let's see how are different typical emotions manifesting in the breath. And by the way, before I draw some signatures of breath, I encourage you to experiment with this. When you are talking to someone, and this is a great tool, by the way, especially for consultants, therapists, doctors, anybody who has to work one-on-one with somebody, even salespeople, okay? If you have to work one-on-one with somebody or you are just communicating to someone, pay attention when you are not speaking, yeah, or when you are speaking or when they are speaking. Well, when they are speaking, you cannot see it so well because by speaking, they're going to be regulating their breath. But if you can do it at the same time, you are saying whatever you have to say, but on a secondary plane, you are looking at their breath and notice how is their breath. And then when you stop speaking and you are listening to the other one, pay attention to what they say so you can respond, but also copy the kind of breath that they had. So if we copy the breath, and you can try this, you can train yourself to do this for me, the best place is the underground. I spent, when I was younger, many hours in the underground. So I would do all these experiments. So whoever I had in front of me, I would just pretend I'm not looking at their body, right? Because you don't want them freaking out. And especially if you're a man, especially if the other is a woman, you don't want them freaking out. This guy is looking at me weirdly. But just looking at the breath, try from the side of the eye, how is this person breathing? And start copying it. And when you copy the breath, a couple of things is going to happen. One is you're going to start experiencing part of the emotional and mental state that the other one is experiencing. And the better you copy the breath, the more clear it will be, the more easy it will be to relate. So that's already interesting to know what's happening within them. And the other thing is, there is this weird mechanism in us, in the brain, that there is this, you've seen about this, like somebody makes a gesture and the other one copies the gesture. Now, this is something that has been utilized consciously to manipulate someone or to just create rapport with the other person. But a lot of it is subconscious, unless you are like a salesman and you're, utilizing these techniques. Most people do it unconsciously, and one is doing one gesture and the other one copies the gesture, and that shows the rapport, the amount of rapport that they have. Well, when you copy the breath of the other person, there's going to be a lot of empathic connection between you and the other person. And not only there will be a rapport in the sense that the other one is going to feel closer to you, but also an empathic connection because you are having a feeling of how they are feeling. So that's going to put you in a much better position to have a good dialogue rather than a discussion, an argument, So that's already interesting, and I recommend to practice that when you are sitting in the bus, sitting in the train. When you've practiced it enough, then you can practice it with people when you're speaking to them. So as you're speaking, you are noticing their breath. When they are speaking, you are copying the breath, and that you start to recognize what is happening in the other person. And one thing will become clear very, very quickly. Some types of breath you do not want to copy. After copying a few people's breath, you will, I'm exaggerating a little bit and I'm doing it with the open mouth so you can hear it as well, and you notice them breathing like this and you're like, what's happening? Okay, let me try it. And you will notice the feelings that come up and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to be in this person's skin. So that's going to tell us a lot about what is a kind of breath that we would like to recreate and one type of breath that we do not want to recreate. So let's go into the different signatures and then we will talk about the yogic breath. And already I see that the video is getting long, but we have a few things to cover that are extremely interesting, or I find extremely interesting. I hope you do too. If so, feel free to tell me in the comments. All right, let's go. So the first kind of breath would be a moment in which you are feeling close to the other. And in the literature on this topic, they sometimes call it tenderness, feeling tender, yeah? Kind of like soft and loving towards the other person. And that's actually pretty similar to the tidal breathing. It's very when I do these lines, you should understand this is 0%, this is 100, okay? So this is when I'm completely empty, this is when I'm completely full. So hopefully you can understand these drawings. I'm an engineer, so it's in my nature to do this kind of drawings, but hopefully you understand what I mean by this. Well, tender is similar to the tidal breathing. It goes and then comes down and down and down, but it tends to go a little bit longer in the exhale. So it's like sometimes a bit longer state without breathing. Yeah. There is this feeling of, oh, I like being with you. I enjoy being with you. And it is quite superficial, quite shallow, but is slow. We can say slow and shallow, yeah? Soft and elongating the exhales. Exhaling is like letting go and feeling good. All right. Let's compare this to laughter, for example. You're laughing with your friend. When we laugh, we take a big inhale. So there's this something like this. Inhale and and even if we are not laughing, but we are in a moment of a lot of joy and happiness and fun, that will also follow this going up and, with a certain going down like this. This is laughter. And now, if you notice, the lines here are going much higher. So we are getting fuller and emptier with every breath. So laughing is actually great to open up the lung capacity. You open up the lungs a lot with laughing. Now there is another pattern of breath that is very, very similar, but the opposite. Well, you can imagine if it's not laughing, it's crying. Crying, the jaggedness, this perturbed exhalation happens in the inhalation. So it's more like So you see all this jaggedness. Sometimes it can be much, much bigger, especially if they are sobbing, yeah? They are crying loud, and that's going to be even higher, the amount of jagged lines that we find here. But this is kind of the pattern. These lines come into the inhalation. Yeah? Makes sense? All right. Now let's go to two of the emotions that most trigger when we are in a stressful situation. One would be just anger. If we are in a stressful situation, let's say we're in front of a lion, we have to call upon all our aggressive nature to either fight or flight. If we want to survive, we have to get angry. In a way, it's a healthy anger. It's a moment that you have to deal with it in some way. Well, that is actually going to be triggered by a very rapid, strong up and down of the breath. Very, very fast, quick, and up and down, deep breath. Yeah, you can hear this in somebody who is getting worked up. Yeah, he's getting ready to go to fight. If you pay attention to the breath, when two people are speaking, but sometimes one is pretending they are not affected, but you can notice the breath. You notice increasing the rate. Yeah, this variability, it goes higher and higher, so much faster breath. And there is another one that triggers when we are in stress, but this is one that is more paralyzing, and this is fear. Because if the fear mechanism can bring you into anger, so you can fight or flight, but fear, there is an imbalance in the inhale and the exhale, totally chaotic, and it may go up and down and kind of like this, going up and then down, so sort of like that. Very, very chaotic. And this is the fear response. But it's also deep, as you can see. This would be deep and chaotic. Deep and fast. This is deep and slow. This is deep and slow. Slow meaning that there's many breaths per minute, but they are both jagged. I hope this is how you write jagged. I'm not 100% sure. Well, there we go. So all these different patterns show the different ways of breathing, the different ways that we can breathe. But none of this shows the yogic breath. So what is the yogic breath? Well, let's put it here. From 0 to 100, the yogic breath will be like this. It's like a sinusoidal wave. Yeah? Up and down. Smooth, slow, gradual transitions from the empty towards inhaling, towards finishing the inhale, beginning the exhale, transition, right? There is no big straight lines. There is no edges. It's soft, continuous, flowing. This is what we call long deep breathing. And in yoga, we say, well, the ideal would be to aim. We were talking about the average is around 15 per minute. Go towards 1 breath per minute. Now, to me, this is only realistic when I'm meditating. During the day, if you are doing things, it's hard to breathe so slow because you don't have enough oxygen and energy to do the things that you have to do. And we don't always have to be so relaxed, so calm, okay? If we have to activate, we can increase the rate not necessarily getting angry, but getting all the energy moving so we can increase the path, the frequency. But if we are just in a regular state, or we are just calmly walking, taking a walk, it will not be 1 breath per minute, but you can slow down the breath. And if you slow it down, it means you're still gonna need energy. So that means you make it deeper. Yeah, it's not just, this would not work if it was just like this, very soft, only using 10%. It would not be enough. So we have to utilize our full capacity. And that also helps to reprogram all these muscles to let them know that they can function in harmony one with each other. They don't have to fight with each other. And when we do the proper training to do long deep breathing, then we can help finding harmony amongst all these muscles. And in my case, for example, I'm going to share when I corrected the paradoxical breathing, it took me around probably 3 weeks to notice that I was starting to breathe properly during the day without thinking. So sometimes during the day I would check and I was like, oh, I'm breathing properly now. I'm not breathing the other way around. And to get all the muscles in harmony in a way that I would feel a full yogic breath naturally, and then I would during the day notice that kind of breath happening naturally, even subconsciously. Yeah, so you'd retrain your body. That took me a few months. I did around 6 months of breath work when I started my yogic practice when I was much younger. And in around 6 months, I felt that I was fully, I had retrained all these muscles. And still, even after that, in stressful situations, sometimes it would trigger the paradoxical breathing for a moment, but then I would be able to quickly notice and change that. So, but I already said, in a few weeks' time, maybe 2-3 weeks, if you do it consistently and with the right intention, you can change this pattern of how the abdomen moves with the inhale and the exhale. So that's the basics. All right. So in the video that we are live streaming, so if somebody is live streaming and watching this, I had mentioned that we were going to do a different kind of breath. I was going to suggest to do a different kind of breath, but I will leave it for another day. Let me go a bit into depth on how to train ourselves to undo the damage of paradoxical breathing, because I think since a lot of the video has been dedicated to that, I think it makes sense that we cover that. And we will do the other one. I'm in the title, initially I mentioned the Viking breath, and you may be curious about that. Well, that's gonna come up in another video. We will do it in another video. But let's talk about how to do this practice to retrain your body. And it should be very easy. And maybe I have already mentioned it before in YouTube. I'm not sure, but very, very simple. I mentioned laying down, one hand in the abdomen, one hand in the chest. And the first exercise you have to do, and let's try it. Let me guide it. Okay, let me guide you for a little while. So if you can lay down, it's ideal if you can lay down. If you cannot, then okay, sit up and just relax. Try to have a straight posture without putting too much effort into it. And hold one hand in the chest, one hand in the abdomen. It doesn't matter which is which. And then for a moment, just if you can, close your eyes and concentrate on the breath. And so the first step is to tell our body that we're going to be doing abdominal breathing. So concentrate on the abdomen. And when you inhale, the belly should come up and out and inflate. The whole abdominal region should be opening up and expanding. And when you exhale, it goes back down, is deflating. Now the chest, don't move the chest. Don't do any kind of breathing in the upper chest area. Just do abdominal breathing for a while. And count the breaths. And make it deep breath, not just shallow, tidal breathing, but deep yogic breaths. So make the belly move well, so that without using the upper chest, make it as deep as you can. So inhaling, the belly goes up. Exhaling, the belly goes down. And for some people, those who don't have paradoxical breathing, this will be very simple. For those who have the paradoxical breathing, this exercise already is going to be already difficult. It's going to take a lot of attention and consciousness and focus to do it. And it's okay. If this is your situation, it's okay. The retraining is going to take a while, but this is part of the exercise. So when you do this at home, I recommend to do 10 full breaths like this. And now we're going to change and we're going to do pectoral breathing, chest breathing, yeah? So now the inhale is in the upper chest. So the diaphragm, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the abdomen. And all the movement should be happening in the upper chest. All the muscles that are moving are the intercostal muscles and in the region of the neck and the shoulders. So feel how that region expands when you inhale and they contract when you exhale. But the hand that is on the chest should be moving, but the hand on the abdomen should not be moving. Okay, the second part of the exercise is pectoral breathing, so the abdomen should not be moving. And at first, many people who have never done this exercise will realize that it's very difficult because the abdomen wants to move. And you are telling the chest to breathe, but then the hand on the belly inevitably is moving all over the place. And you have to focus, concentrate, only using the muscles in the upper chest. Chest, upper chest. And while you do this, there's many instructions. When you practice this, you can do it at home, on the bed, without listening to me giving you all these instructions, just by yourself, by what you remember of the exercise. But when you do this, the belly is not moving, but it's not stable because it's tense. Okay, try not to tense it so it doesn't move. It should not be moving because it's relaxed. This is an important thing. We are learning to utilize the right muscles that we want in the right moment that we want, but relaxing the others, not tensing the others. It's relatively easy to do a breathing in the chest if you tense the abdomen so it doesn't move. Try to not do that. Relax the abdomen. I don't know how many have you done. Maybe you're already number 10. I would recommend again to do 10 of these ones. And now we switch again to the abdomen. So start doing abdominal breathing again. Now the pectoral muscles should not move. So now the chest is stable. The hand on the chest, it doesn't move. And the hand in the abdomen is moving. Up and down, inhaling up, exhaling down. And try to do the change from the chest to the abdomen smoothly. You don't need to do the breath very slow. In this exercise, it's more about depth, going very deep, rather than going very slow. And do 10 of these. You should be counting them. Okay, do one more. Inhale. Abdomen fills. And exhale. And now we switch again one more time and do breathing in the chest and do 10 more in the chest. Again, the abdomen doesn't move, being relaxed. Continue like this, and you will notice that sometimes when you do a full breath like this, there will be areas of your breath that are not nice and flowing. They are jagged. They are like tick, 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 tick. And that's the emotional signature of your breath and the mental signature. The more you breathe in this way, the more they are softening up, and you will become much more calm. It's very, very relaxing. That's why it's fantastic to do this breath before going to bed. Instead of checking your phone, social media, and activating the brain, and then it's difficult to sleep. Rather than doing that, laying on your back in the bed already, one hand in the chest, one hand in the abdomen, 10 abdominal breaths, 10 pectoral breaths, 10 abdominal breaths, 10 pectoral breaths. Do one more. Okay, go back to the abdomen one more time. The transition should be easier now that you've done it twice. Okay, and now you could basically stay there until you fall asleep. But now, for the sake of the video, we'll stop here the breathing exercise for a moment. Let me explain something, and I will explain one more exercise. So if you've never done this exercise, I think it's an amazing exercise for anyone to help how to breathe, to learn how to breathe properly. I think it should be taught to children in the physical education classes in school. You know, what's more physical than breathing? Why don't we teach our children how to breathe? Okay, if you've never done it, it's good for everybody to spend at least 1 week doing this exercise before going to bed. If you've done this exercise for 1 week, then, so that's 10 breaths on the abdomen, 10 pectoral breaths, 10 abdominal breaths, 10 pectoral breaths, and then we will do another exercise. And now I'm going to show it now, I'm going to guide you now, but if this is your first time doing it, okay, we do it together right now, but if you decide to do these exercises at home, dedicate a whole week just doing this abdominal, pectoral, and separating the two regions. And it's very important because we want to isolate the different muscle groups which are involved in the breath, so that we can learn to control them consciously. So the diaphragm, okay, let's focus on that one, and to be able to isolate it from the other muscles, from the intercostal muscles and the upper chest and neck and shoulders. So you isolate them, work on only one, 10 breaths, other one, 10 breaths, other one, 10 breaths, other one, 10 breaths. And now when you've done this for a week, on the second week, you can start to connect them together. So there is going to be a second part of an exercise. I'm going to guide it now. And then there's going to be a third part of an exercise that I'm going to guide it right away. But I would say for the second exercise, you do it for another week. And then on the third week, you can do the 3 exercises together. Okay, let's go to the second one. If you can lay down and close your eyes, and one hand on the chest, one hand on the abdomen, you do that. Hopefully you've been already doing this exercise, so you've been moving the abdomen and moving the chest. So now let's do it just 2 more, well, let's do 3 times. 3 abdominal breaths. Only the breath in the abdomen and the chest should stay still. 2, 3, now 3 in the chest. Only the pectoral muscles move and the abdomen stays relaxed. Make sure the abdomen doesn't hold any tension. Okay, so now we are just like at the end of the first exercise. The second exercise is the following. Now, Exhale completely. Now inhale abdomen. Hold it. Inhale chest. Hold it. You have to stop. Exhale chest. Hold it. Exhale abdomen. Hold it. Inhale abdomen. Hold. Inhale chest. Hold. Exhale chest. Hold. Exhale abdomen. Navel way inside. Hold. Inhale abdomen. Navel out. Hold. Inhale chest. Hold. Exhale chest. Hold. Exhale abdomen. Navel in and up. Navel out. Inhale. Hold. Chest. Hold. Exhale chest. Hold. Exhale abdomen. Hold. Okay, relax. Relax the breath. And you do this 10 times. So for the second week of this exercise, you do the first week exercises. So 10 abdomen, 10 chest, 10 abdomen, 10 chest. And then 10 inhaling abdomen, inhaling chest, exhaling abdomen. Abdomen, chest, chest, abdomen. You do 10 of this. But the two muscle groups are still differentiated. And after you do this exercise for the whole second week, then comes the third week of the exercises. And in the third week, we're going to add one third exercise after doing everything we have done up until now. So I will guide one more time the second exercise, and then I will guide the third exercise. So exhale, inhale abdomen, inhale chest, hold, exhale chest, hold, exhale abdomen, hold. And now inhale abdomen, and as the abdomen is inhaling, start to connect the abdomen with the chest. And you harmonize the muscles from the abdomen to the chest. So it starts from the abdomen, but you start also from the chest. And at the end, you are fully inhaled from the chest as well. And when you have to exhale, first the chest lowers and you connect those muscles to the movement of the belly, and the navel goes in and up. And then first is the navel coming up and down and out. And then is the chest. They are moving gradually from the bottom to the top, connecting the different muscle groups so that it's a natural one natural flow for the breath. Exhaling down, chest, slowly into the abdomen, and make it as full as possible now from when you're inhaling. Because you're using all the muscle groups, you should reach 100% capacity of your breath. So abdomen and chest, full inhale, and exhale, full chest, full abdomen, connecting all the muscle groups, making sure there is one nice, soft, flowing transition from one to the other. Very deep. Slow and deep. And I recommend to do this exercise 10 full breaths. And because you are ready to go to sleep and you will be very relaxed after this, then you keep the eyes closed and then just relax the breath after doing the 10th. And just notice one point in the center of your chest. And you can notice how it goes up when you inhale and down when you exhale. And fully relax within yourself. And then forget about muscles, forget about navel, abdomen, diaphragm, chest. Forget about all of that and just relax into the breath. Inhale deep and exhale. And if you are laying down, move a little bit the hands and the feet and stretch the arms and the legs. And rock back and forth and come back sitting up. So these are the 3 exercises to practice gradually, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So the third week you do the 3 of them. It doesn't take long. It's just a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes before going to sleep. You're already in bed and it's going to be very relaxing and you're going to sleep much better, you will see. In terms of training the body to breathe properly, after you've done these 3 weeks, from the 4th week onwards, I recommend to start practicing sitting. And the first times I recommend to do this sitting in rock pose, so on the knees, knees bent. If you can sit like that, even if you need some cushion or some little meditation stools, do that, because that posture is going to allow a full movement of the abdomen. While if you are sitting cross-legged, the abdomen is more tense. So if you can sit in that posture, lightning bolt pose or the rock pose, then do the same exercise that we did now, but sitting. It's going to be a bit more difficult, but it's going to be very rewarding, because this is the position that we have the body most of the time. So if we can learn to apply those practices, those pranayams in sitting up, that's going to be incredible benefits for your practice and for your day-to-day. It's not just for the practice, but you can be walking through, in the street and doing the exercise. Nobody's going to know that you're doing the breathing exercise. And the deeper and the long, the slower and the deeper that you can make the breath, then the more benefits it's going to have to your psycho-emotional state. It is said you cannot be angry breathing less than 4 times per minute. It's just not possible. So, try to regulate. If you have issues with some emotions, not just anger, anxiety. If you suffer from anxiety, well, I already explained the mechanisms of stress and anxiety in the diaphragm. If you suffer from that, then there's nothing better than learning how to breathe properly. And retrain ourselves, because we lose that. Babies have it naturally. You notice the belly of the baby, notice them, and it's just wonderful how they breathe. And at some point, they stop breathing like that, and we start acquiring our ego and our traumas and all the challenges, and then we end up with situations like the paradoxical breathing that I was mentioning. But this is a good way to train yourself. Observe your signature. If you are paying attention to the breath during your practice, yogic practice, when you are during the day, you will be more aware of your breath. And then when something is starting like this, you will notice, whoops, what's happening? I'm getting emotional. What is this emotion happen? What is going on? Why is this chaotic breath? Why am I getting anxious? Why is this accelerating? And by paying attention to your breath, you can have another input into, another insight into how you are on a subconscious level. Sometimes we don't realize what we are thinking behind, the superficial mind. There's a lot of other inner darker narratives that we don't notice, and the emotions start to come up. So if we can pay attention to the breath, we can realize the psycho-emotional state and prevent going full on into an anxious state, for example. And you just go back to the breath, full deep breaths. If you put a mantra in it, it's going to be even more powerful. That's going to be much healthier. All right, so we covered the basics of breathing and paradoxical breathing today. This could be like the beginning of a course on breathing. Let me know if you're interested in that, and I will explore it in following weeks. And we didn't do the Viking breath that I announced in the title, but we will include it some other day. For today, I think it's enough. It was a long video. Thank you everyone for watching, and Thank you for the likes and the subscribes and sharing it. If you are a yoga teacher, you can share with your students as well. And let's help each other to heal our traumas and to heal our body, to start breathing properly and receiving maximum energy, maximum prana, maximum of our spirit here, and maximum consciousness. Thank you very much. Till next time, Satnam.